Hey friends, today I'm going to be looking at a brand new set of Dwarven Forge tabletop accessories. I'm a huge Dwarven Forge nut. I've been using Dwarven Forge accessories in my own RPGs for about 15 years. And so I've bought a lot of Dwarven Forge accessories in the past, many years. I've backed every single one of their Kickstarters. I think 7 or 8 Kickstarters that they've run, and I've backed all of them. I really like their stuff a lot. And they were kind enough to send me a review set of their latest set, the Hellscape Caverns sets. There's a number of different sets. We're going to talk about them. Dwarven Forge, like miniatures, like both miniatures collection and miniatures painting, is sort of its own side hobby in the role-playing game industry. It's not a core function of role-playing games. You do not need Dwarven Forge terrain to run a good RPG. You can run fantastic RPGs spending hardly any money at all. And I actually have a couple of videos where I talk about how to run great games without spending hardly any money at all, and where you can spend very little money to have some accessories for your game that work really well, like my favorite, the index card. I have a bunch of videos linked in the show notes below. I suggest you check them out. But also, there is a high end to this hobby too. There are dedicated cruises. There are D&D in a castle vacation events. There are people who build entire wings of their house in order to play D&D in it. There's really no upper limit to how much people can spend in RPGs. The truth is, how good your game is not really dependent on how much money you spend on it. The things you can do to make your game great, to really make your game exciting for you and your players, you can do for free. So while all of the accessories you can buy can really add to the experience, it's really fun to have this stuff. It's a fun way to play, to have the perfect miniatures for the game that you're running, and to have really, really cool 3D terrain. While all that stuff is really great, it is not dependent upon that to make your game great. You can make your game great in lots of other ways that cost nothing at all. So that said, we are looking at a high-end accessory today. Dwarven Forge terrain definitely falls in the area of a high-end accessory for role-playing games. And they know it. The Dwarven Forge team knows it. They are a fantastic company. They're based out of Brooklyn, in New York, in the USA. They have sculptors on staff who hand sculpt this stuff. They take prototypes. They spend a lot of time, a lot of different artists putting together all these pieces. The design of them are both built for their artistic integrity, how beautiful they are, but also how functional they are, how well they fit together. I recently got my set of Wildlands Dwarven Forge terrain from the Kickstarter that they ran 2 years ago. And as much as I'm impressed with how good it looks, I'm equally impressed with how well it plays together, that various pieces sit well next to each other, how it always seems like I never am missing the piece that I need. I'm always able to put the things together that work really well. All of it just plays really well together. And that really speaks to how the folks at Dwarven Forge, the artists at Dwarven Forge, not only think about how to make this stuff beautiful, but how to make it really work well together. When I look at what I purchased from Dwarven Forge, I look at it with versatility in mind. How easily is it for me to put this out on the table? In how many different situations can I use this terrain? I really keep in mind that I want to have systems. I want to have pieces for Dwarven Forge that make a big impact, that mean something both in the game and out of the game, and that are easy for me to use. So I tend to lean towards scatter terrain. I tend to lead towards set pieces, things that sit in the middle that make a big impact, that look really cool on their own, and that I can just throw on the table with my miniatures around it, and that's all I really need. So I really like focusing on that. So that means when the Hellscape Kickstarter came out, I focused my attention on the Hellscape scatter pieces, big set pieces, things like evil portals and gates and weird cauldrons of lava. I didn't buy the walls, corners, and floors. So when Dwarven Forge reached out to me and said, hey, we have this new Hellscape Cavern set and we'd like you to check it out. And so I was interested to see what it was like. And I was also interested to think, like, is it going to have the same kind of flexibility that the other sets of Dwarven Forge that I have, right? That one of the reasons why I didn't get the walls, corners, and floors of the original Hellscape set was because I thought, like, well, it's too specialized, right? How often are you really going to run a big area with a bunch of lava in it? I could certainly see you running it from time to time, but unlike dungeons and caverns and mountains and things like that, I just didn't see myself using it that much. But what I found out when I started playing with it is that these sets really surprised me. The thing that surprised me the most is how easily this stuff can integrate with my existing caverns and dungeons. That it makes sense that you don't have to have a whole dungeon built this way. You could have just a room built this way. You could have one small piece of your dungeon set aside. I think about the adventure Tomb of Annihilation and the Tomb of the Nine Gods. There's a chamber that's like this one charred out room, and you don't know what's going on in there, but when you open the door, you see it's all burnt out. If I had built that with Dwarven Forge, and I ran a lot of the Tomb of the Nine Gods using Dwarven Forge, I could have shown one charred room, and instead of me having to describe, oh yeah, this room isn't like the other ones that you see here, this one's charred out, even though it doesn't look that way, I could actually have a small chamber off to the side that was charred out like that. That certainly would have gotten the players' attention. It would have been cool for them to see, and I think they would have liked it. So what really surprised me the most was how easily I could see these pieces integrating with all of my other existing sets. That even having only a small set of this, right? Not spending a fortune on many different rooms of this, but instead just having a small set of it augments my existing cavern set and my existing dungeon set. So when I think about who I would recommend these sets to, it's somebody that's already invested in Dwarven Forge. You already have dungeon sets, you already have cavern sets, and you're looking to expand upon that with rooms that have lava. So these brand new sets use the standard builds that the Dwarven Forge Cavern set uses, but they're molded in the semi-transparent plastic that lets light shine through them. So they use a yellowish plastic that you can illuminate from below. And really these sets break out into a few different sets. You have the Hellscape Caverns core set, which is probably going to go for $198. That's what Dwarven Forge told me when they sent this to me. A Hellscape Caverns advanced pack, which is $150. The Hellscape floor pack, which comes with a whole bunch of different floors, and that's $110. In order to illuminate these sets, to make them glow like you're seeing in here, you need LED panels. And you can get two different sets of LED panels, both a single LED panel with a power supply that runs $56, and two extra LED panels without a power supply runs $79. So really, when I look at the set that they sent me and when I played with it, we're talking about a $650, $700 set of Dwarven Forge with everything thrown in. That's the LED panels and all the sets. So when I looked at all the different pieces, the pieces that came with the advanced set, I found to be a little less versatile than the sets that come in the Cavern's core. The walls, corners, and floors, those are the pieces that really work well for me. A lot of the advanced sets are nice and they're cool, but they're a little harder to use. The one that I thought worked really well is they have the walls that have a step up in them so that you can create sort of an altar. I thought those pieces are really useful. Unfortunately, I don't think it's worth buying the whole Cavern Advanced set just for those two pieces. And I think you can get away. I would almost suggest, instead of buying the Advanced pack, of buying another Cavern core set, which is going to give you a lot more pieces and extra versatility. But getting back to that idea that the Dwarven Forge artists know how to create pieces that work really well together, they have come up with a way to give you standard walls, corners, and floors, but give you a variety of different ones. 4 different kinds of corners, 4 different kinds of floors, 4 different kinds of walls. And you can mix and match these walls, corners, and floors to build really organic builds without having to use a lot of different kinds of pieces, right? And I found that worked really well with the Cavern Mega Build sets that they sell as part of their core sets. Those Cavern core sets are fantastic because they're all walls, corners, and floors, but you can use these sets to make really organic layouts. And the same thing is true with the ones that you get from Hellscape. Now, in order to make these pieces really, literally shine, you need to have the LED panels under them. They still look really cool if you don't have the LED panels, but something that you're paying a lot of money to have these semi-transparent pieces that allow light to shine through them. That's why the costs on these sets are so high. And if you don't have the LED panels, you're really not benefiting from that. So it really helps if you have the LED panels underneath. Now, one of the disadvantages of the LED panels is they are not magnetic. One of the best features that Dwarven Forge has added to their sets over the past few years are magnetic pieces. All the pieces have a small magnet in the bottom, and you can use these things called terrain trays, which are essentially a piece of terrain that has a metal plate embedded in it. And the pieces stick right to the tray, which means you can hold them on this tray. You can move those trays around. You can take them to your local game shop. I've done this. You can set up pizza racks and put each of the trays already pre-built, which means you can fly in rooms. That is one of the things that has made Dwarven Forge much easier to use as a lazy dungeon Dungeon Master. Unfortunately, the LED panels are not magnetic. They can't be. So the pieces aren't, when you sit the pieces on top of them, they can slide around, which means you can't really easily pick it up and move it around. Also, there is a little bit of light bleed through. They give you a grid that can sit underneath, a sort of a blackened grid that you can slide on your light panel and underneath your pieces so that you won't see light shining through. I wasn't using it for this particular picture, and you can see how the light bleeds through. With that grid in place and with all the pieces properly aligned, it doesn't shine through. You can also use pieces of construction paper, black construction paper underneath, to hide areas that might otherwise illuminate through. So here's an interesting trick. According to some of the last polls that I've done, more players are playing online than are playing in person. And so when you have something like tabletop terrain like this, it can be kind of a drag if you can't actually have your players enjoy it because you're mostly playing online. The trick that I found is you can actually use Dwarven Forge online. And what I did is I set up setups like this. I didn't have the light panels yet when I ran a game with it. But the day that I got this stuff, I was able to actually use it in the game I was running that night, which tells you a little bit about the flexibility of these sets, that even though I thought they were going to be too specialized, I was able to say like, wow, I can actually use this in my game today. And I don't think that was just coincidence. I think this stuff is a lot more versatile than I really thought. But for online play, what I did is I would set it up and make it all look very nice. And I set it sort of on a 3/4 angle, and I took a picture with my phone. I took that picture and I threw it into my virtual tabletop of choice. I use Owlbear Rodeo. You turn off the grid, you make sure that the sizing is about right. You have to kind of figure out exactly what size it should be so that the tokens fit on it well. And then players can drop their tokens right on the map and move them around as though they're playing on Dwarven Forge. I did this using Owlbear Rodeo in Discord, and we had a wonderful time. People were able to really enjoy the terrain. They were able to see their characters. They were really able to experience it. So for those of us that had Dwarven Forge and have Dwarven Forge but are still playing games online, we can set up really nice, elaborate setups. We can take pictures of them, set those in our library, put the pieces away, and now we have this library of Dwarven Forge pictures that we've made ourselves that we can use in our virtual tabletops or online play. So it's a really interesting way to play. I really enjoyed doing it. I've done it now a few times, and I think it really has it really adds something to the experience. It gives people the feeling of having that physical terrain in front of them, even when you're playing online. If you already have a good collection of dungeon and cavern sets, this new Hellscape Cavern set could really add a fun new layer to what you've already got. I was surprised at how well it integrated with existing caverns and dungeons to build out new areas. So for a Dwarven Forge enthusiast, for a Dwarven Forge hobbyist who already has a good collection of Dwarven Forge and wants to expand their area using some new stuff that will really excite your players, I think it's an outstanding recommendation. I do not recommend this for somebody who's brand new to Dwarven Forge. I think you're better off going with the standard dungeon, the vaulted dungeon, and the cavern sets that exist, the core cavern sets that already exist on Dwarven Forge. It's significantly less money, but still really cool. And again, I would remind you that if this is out of your league, if the kind of money that we're talking about here is not something that's attainable for you, that is not a problem when it comes to you and the hobby of role-playing games. You can enjoy D&D games for almost no money at all using both online tools and in-person tools. And the things that matter most are the stories that you share with your fellow players around the table. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you can help me out by subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter, supporting me directly on Patreon, picking up any of my books, or subscribing to my videos right here on YouTube. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and get out there and play some D&D.